Hello, welcome to Algorithms. My name is Saurabh, and in this presentation, we are going to discuss about cloud migration myth. This is part two of the cloud adoption framework. Now, when we are done with the motivation part, we need to build a business justification for cloud migration. We do need to include early return on investment from cloud transformation efforts, but developing a clear-cut business case with a relevant cost and returns is a complex process. And this series is going to help you with the financial model, operating model, aligning your partner strategy, how to adopt first project for your cloud readiness, governance, management, and so on and so forth. Now, all that is very good, but if you are trapped in myths, you may end up making mistakes, and that's what we want you to avoid. So the cloud is always cheaper. It's this is an assumption, I would say, but not always the case. Sometimes cloud operating costs are higher, and what we have observed over the period of time, the reason for higher cost, the factors that are contributing is poor cost governance. And because if you look at the governance aspect, infrastructure governance, security governance, overall other component of governance are done very well and crafted very well, but cost governance sometimes don't get enough time and effort in order to make sure that we are doing it in the right way. Misaligned system architecture, process duplication, uh, and incorrect system configuration. Incorrect does not mean you have done something wrong. Sometimes we go overboard. That's also one of the reason, because when you are planning cloud, it's not like in the past that you are buying hardware and you have to plan for 2 to 3 years. In the cloud world, you have to plan for 6 months, 6 to 8 months, or maybe 3 to 6 months in certain business cases, depending on which sort of business vertical you are in, because different businesses have different growth rates. And here you are not buying hardware. Here is just you have to enable certain switches or certain configuration, and you can scale up, scale out very easily. Okay, so that's where you have to make sure you don't go 2 years, 3 years, and you don't over configure it. Okay, now the second one is operating expense model is better than a capital expense model. If you look at any presentation or most of the presentations, most of the white papers, they emphasize why you adopt cloud. From the cost perspective, operating expense is the heart of their reason. Okay, but that's not the case always. So I'm giving you a couple of reasons. So for instance, when a business sees capital assets as a driver for business valuation, capital expense reductions could be a negative outcome. So you see, there are certain businesses which emphasize a lot on capital assets when they are valuing those business valuations, right? Private equity firm or a company that is seeking capital influx may consider operating expense increases as negative outcome. The other one I would like to share, if a business is focusing heavily on improving sales margins or reducing cost of goods sold, operating expense could be a negative outcome. However, it happens often that businesses are more likely to see operating expenses as more favorable than capital expenses, because this approach might be well received by businesses that are trying to improve cash flow, reduce capital investment, or decrease asset holdings. So this is very important when you are designing, just to make sure that you keep these aspects of your business in mind. Because if your motivation is to reduce cost, and if you are moving and if you are translating your asset from one point to another point, that may impact negatively on your business valuation, as I just explained. So you have to be very careful. You may need to do some research about your business, not from the IT or technology perspective, but from the pure business valuation perspective. Because if you are a hedge fund company, if you are a startup, okay, then how do you see your assets? How do you see your, so you have to build a completely different dimension in your perspective when you are talking about moving from capital expense model to operating expense model, and it is not an easy discussion, I would say, though a lot of IT folks include in their presentations, but it's very difficult because unless you know the exact nature of business, I won't include this term in my presentation. Moving to cloud is like flipping a switch, so there could be a lot of limitations. So for instance, when you are creating a list of motivation and you decided that you have critical business event that you want to migrate, but at the same time you have bandwidth limitations, you have testing timelines, testing application with the business to ensure that readiness and performance is tested, and aligning power users. So all those things are critical. It is not something which can be done very quickly. Migration timelines, so the amount of time and effort required to implement the migration can increase cost and can cause delays. Allocating employees or contracting partners can also delay the process, because what is the procurement process in your organization, how long it takes. So all those factors contribute to it. And there are two important aspects, which are technical and cultural challenges, that can also slow down the adoption. For instance, uh, if people challenge or cultural challenge arise, there are more serious effects than technical constraints, because cloud adoption creates change, and this produces a certain type of fear in employees, uh, and that's where it is difficult to get support when it comes to cloud transformation or cloud migration project. From the technical point of view, investment in training, skill readiness, skill alignment, that's where I have seen, or we as an organization have seen, certain challenges. Server cost drive business cases for cloud migration. This is also an interesting point, because as I said, if you don't know the business vertical or the type of business, it is not a good idea to put this as one of the driving factors, because in certain organizations, and I have seen this, the refresh cycle is 5 to 7 years. They don't go with 2 to 3 years because their business does not require it. So if I have 5 to 7 year cycle for a refresh cycle for my hardware, it does not make sense for me to move to cloud, because the return on investment will not be so early in the process. It will take a very long time for me to realize those ROIs. Okay. And when I talk about server cost, so now there are several dimensions to it, like cost of software for virtualizations and middleware. That can be extensive, so you can look at those aspects. You can also look at business loss. For instance, if outage happens, why it happened, is it because of hardware or software, then is it because your data center is unstable. You can include those aspects, or look at those aspects, rather than just making a blank statement or a big statement that server cost is going to drive the business case for cloud migration. You can work with the business to quantify the impact of outage when it happened in the past, in terms of opportunity cost or actual business cost, to include in your business case. Now environmental cost can also be significant. For instance, why the environmental cost, for instance, when you have a data center, it is a real estate facility, and utility cost represent a fair portion of on-premises cost. So you can include those aspects. But yes, server cost drive business case for cloud migration. I have seen this as a blanket statement in many of the presentations, but I don't think accordingly. There are a lot of other moving variables that we have to consider before making such statements. Now, apart from that, mirroring on-premises environment, yeah, this is also very interesting point. Why? Because sometimes we present a case which is completely focused on, okay, we have on premises and we want to just create a mirror copy of on-premises environment in the cloud. But at the same time, we don't look at the usage patterns. We look at the provisioning patterns, that how many servers we have and so on and so forth from the resource perspective, but we don't look at the usage patterns. And I have seen in the past where I have done uh, engagements for application consolidation, server consolidation, that they have got 2000 database instances, 5000 servers, and 45 to 60% of them are unutilized from the workload perspective. So the focus on usage pattern rather than provisioning pattern, that is going to help you in terms of saving money when it comes to moving to cloud, so that you don't over provision on the cloud and you don't overpay. You just pay for the usage that you have at this point of time. And as I said previously, don't plan for 2 to 3 years. 6 months is good enough, because you have flexibility within clouds where you can flip certain switch and you can scale up and scale out very easily without any downtime in most of the cases. So these are some of the myths that I wanted to dispel. If you have more, please include in the comment section. I guess this is it from my side. Thank you very much. Have a great day.